What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Mixed Doubles podcast. We're your hosts, Maggie Robinson
and Josh Smythe-Macaulay.
We're former D1 athletes and co-workers at a major professional sports league with a passion for all things women's sports. And today we are so excited to launch the beginning of our interview series where we'll be highlighting key women in the world of sports and entertainment. And today's guest could not be more timely. With the recent release of the NFL schedule, we're so excited to bring you Charlotte Carey and Lucy Popko of the NFL scheduling team. Charlotte is a director of broadcasting and has been at the NFL since 2014, and Lucy is a senior coordinator on the broadcast team and started in 2021. They're both key decision makers in the super complex puzzle that is the NFL schedule, and I am so thrilled to have you guys on. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here.
I have to say, this feels full circle, given that literally a year ago, you guys were interviewing me for this role, and now here I am getting to ask you guys questions. So this feels so cool. So thank you.
Yeah, and then I'm just here asking questions too. So a lot of fun. Lucy, we want to start with you. Broadcast is such a unique space, especially doing it at the NFL. We know you've had some really cool jobs leading up to this, but just want to know for you, how was your journey getting here and why? Why NFL? Why broadcast?
You know, it was quite a roundabout journey to get here, but TV and sports have both been something that I've absolutely loved. I wrote my college essay about how I used to love watching 60 Minutes on Sunday. So I knew TV was a space that I always wanted to get into, and I didn't know how. In college, I studied political science, so nothing related to sports whatsoever. And I did a bunch of random jobs and internships. I worked in the Senate. I worked for a marketing firm. I worked at an investment bank. I worked for the National Lacrosse League, and nothing quite stuck, but there were a lot of things I enjoyed doing in each job. And specifically at the National Lacrosse League, I worked with them on their streaming partner, which was a much smaller scale sort of deal than what the NFL is. But I knew it was something that I really enjoyed doing. So when at Penn, I attended Penn for college. I ended up graduating a semester early because this was the height of COVID, and I was, counting all my classes up, and I was like, you know what? I've got enough classes to graduate. Everything's remote. I should just do that because I'm sitting here on Zoom class, which I don't think is as and ended up applying to law school, thinking that was the path I was going to go down. It felt like everyone who was studying political science is going to law school, and it seemed like, hey, this is the thing I have to do. Like everyone's going. But it didn't really feel right as I was doing it. And so as I sort of got down the process, I realized it really wasn't for me at that time. Maybe someday I'll try to go back in the future, but at the time it wasn't right. So I started applying to jobs. And when I was brainstorming, I was like, if I'm not going to be in this really rigid legal career, what's something that's fun? What's something that I love doing? And so my dad was super influential in helping me figure out like, hey, like you love sports, you love TV, like why don't you try to do something at the intersection of both? And so started applying to jobs, and I think luckily I was able to find something at the NFL. But I think it was just the right time. So it was kind of at the end of summer, I started applying once I realized that law school wasn't what I wanted to do, and ended up starting at the NFL in the fall. So I think applying on an off time definitely helped in that regard.
I like how casually you just dropped that you worked at the Senate. Can we back up a little bit? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, so I spent 6 months in Washington, D.C., and I worked in the Senate for Chuck Schumer in his office. And that was one of the coolest things I've ever done.
Oh my God.
I was able to become a transcriber in Senate Democratic meetings. So I spent a lot of times in these, closed doors meetings that we weren't allowed to have any phones. I was the only person really with technology. I had a computer. And so I just would sit there typing all the meeting notes. It just only senators around me. So I think that was one of my coolest life experiences. I realized though, being on the Hill, that it was a little cutthroat and not exactly what I wanted to do per se. But I still look back at that time and think like, wow, that was a really cool experience. I'm glad I got to have it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, no shortage of experience for you. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but, I'm sure that helps with the many hats that you wear in the broadcast department. And then kind of going to you, Charlotte, you've been at the NFL for a good amount of time. You came in as a coordinator. You've been able to rise up to the director level pretty quickly. want to understand your story, joining the NFL, why being in the broadcast department, and then how you've been able to excel in this area.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say when Lucy applied for this role originally, we were looking for somebody to kind of come in and help our team in a lot of different areas. We were a little bit smaller back then, but we looked at Lucy's resume, and to your point, there's so much experience on there. We all looked and we're like, well, maybe she should come run the broadcast department. We love having Lucy on our team. But no, for me, I actually started as a temp, not even a coordinator. I started as a temp, and
We love it.
Maggie and Lucy right on board, right? I mean, so I started really at the bottom level and worked in. I got an opportunity similar to Lucy. I was somebody that wasn't exactly sure after school what I wanted to do. I worked for a little bit in corporate design and realized that wasn't the area I wanted to be in. So I started meeting with everyone I possibly could, knew I loved sports, knew I loved media, and similar to Lucy, wanted to find something that kind of mixed the two. And that was the general direction I wanted to go. From a football standpoint, I was one of three girls, and when I was growing up, my dad wanted to watch football all the time, but having three girls, it's like, all right, who's gonna watch football with me? So, just wanting potentially a little bit more attention and everything else. I was like, all right, Dad, I'll watch football with you. And as a 10-year-old watching football with Dad was pretty cool. I got to go to a lot of games with him, and it became something that he and I did together, and I love. So I found like the NFL in particular, when we were talking about sports, like NFL was number 1, 2, and 3 on my list of places that I wanted to work. So I was lucky enough to get introduced to Kathy Yancey, who's also in our broadcast department, but more on the compliance and contractual side. And I was lucky that it was good timing, and she was looking for somebody to fill this temp role that was, again, pretty bottom of the barrel at that point. And I said, hand in the air, I don't even care what you'll pay me, I'll take it. So came in, worked for her for a few years, absolutely loved it. Knew I wanted to somewhat transition over to the other side of the department, which was more of the production and scheduling side of the group. And again, was able to work with them a bit before an opportunity came up. And when that opportunity came up, I raised my hand again and was lucky enough to be considered, and eventually got the job. So worked my way up from there. Again, consider myself extremely lucky. This group is absolutely incredible. It's a very small group within the NFL, but we do a lot, from the schedule to production to every piece of holding the relationships with the networks. It's pretty amazing, and it's a great group to work with.
That's amazing. That's such a good story too. And I want to give you a congratulations. You recently had a daughter.
I did.
And
Thank you. Yeah. I've got a 4-year-old, or nearly 4-year-old, coming up next month, and then a 5-month-old now at home. So a little busy around the edges here.
I was gonna say, like, with the scheduling season just ending, what was that adjustment like for you?
I came back from maternity leave a little bit early for the schedule. And I'll probably take a little more time off this summer. So
As you should.
Right, as you should.
But no, I had planned on doing this throughout. And you know what? I think that the answer to your question, Josh, is like sleep has become just kind of optional, right? Like it's like, sleep, you just try to figure out like, okay, like between the baby and the schedule, like something's going to keep me up at night. So like if I get like a 3-hour stretch, I'm in really good shape. So you learn to thrive off of like 0 to very little sleep.
Oh my gosh.
Power
That's so
naps
impressive.
all day.
Power naps. Yeah. I'm not
Love
sure when
that.
those power naps happen, but between 4 and 6 a.m. is a really good time for a power nap.
Gotcha. Noted. Thank you.
That's so impressive. I'm in awe of you guys, truly. Could
Charlotte, you should be in awe.
I know. Charlotte and Lauren. Lauren is
Figure
our
it
other
out.
manager on the team, also mom of 2, and I'm like blown away every single day by how you guys juggle all your responsibilities flawlessly, it seems to me. I don't know how you do it.
Flawlessly is not the correct term to use there, but it's amazing. Lauren's incredibly impressive. She's got 2 kids also, and you make it work, right? Like at some point you just figure it out, and there's no other option. You just make it work, and you try to figure out the best of all worlds and be there for your kids. And also, I love my job, so I just juggling it all, and it takes a little while to get in that groove and figure out how to put all the pieces together. But once you can get there, it takes a village to get there, but you can figure it out.
Yeah. You guys are
Absolutely.
awesome. Just for a little bit of context, could you guys kind of explain some background? Why is there so much hype around the NFL schedule, and why, like, what's behind the league's effort to make this a big tentpole event?
I can start here. I mean, I think that the hype around it, right? Like people plan, just weddings and family vacations and everything else around their team schedule. So I think the hype around it is like people literally need the schedule in to actually plan their whole next year in some circumstances. So I do think it's something that's long awaited, and people are really excited for the upcoming season. Also, if you look at the NFL calendar, and now that we pushed it post-draft, the release, there is kind of a lull in the NFL calendar right now before we kind of get into all of the, camp and preseason excitement. So I do think that there's, a fan interest in something to come out for the NFL, but also it's kind of exciting, right? Like you actually it's your first taste of what this year is going to look like, and seeing who you're going to kick off week 1 against. And I think from a fan perspective, it's something that we've noticed that our fans have really kind of latched onto as something that is exciting. So I do think it's become more of just like a natural transition into quote unquote tentpole. Liz, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add there too.
Yeah, I'd say looking at the NFL too, we're very unique in the fact that we have a much shorter season than a lot of other leagues. So we've got 18 weeks of regular season, 3 weeks of preseason, and then postseason, of course, if your team is lucky enough to make it. So that's 272 games for the regular season, much shorter than a lot of other leagues. So NBA, you play 82, NHL, you play 82, MLB is 162 per team. So I think looking at that, every game really counts. So for your fans that have a team and have a vested stake in whatever happens, each game really has a direct outcome on whether you make the postseason or not. So I think learning your team's matchups is one step away from saying, okay, like, will they make the postseason? How's the season going to be? And which teams have a little extra hype around them, especially coming off the draft and all things like that. So I think that is also a unique part of the NFL, and why schedule is so important, because those matchups really do mean a lot, since you only get 17 of them in a season.
Yeah. I have to say, I love seeing on Instagram and social media all the teams come out with their like fantastic schedule release videos.
Yeah.
The one that comes to mind is the Chargers Sims video, where they just drop so many slights. It is so funny.
It was great.
I love, what's her name? Red Stallion girl.
Oh,
From
yeah.
Tennessee. Home state.
Tennessee. Maggie, just want to jump in super quickly. I know one of the things too, and we'll probably talk about it a little later, is international. But like, as a self-proclaimed member of the Who Dat Nation, I remember a couple of years ago waiting for the schedule to come out to see if the Saints were going to play abroad, and they played in London. And I got to go see that game with my uncle who lives in Sussex. So I know that's a big aspect of the schedule as well now, especially with international being a big piece of our league's efforts. So just wanted to throw that in. Don't know if you guys have context.
Yeah. I think like the international plan, to your point, it's grown significantly. We're going to Brazil, which is really exciting, week 1 this year, with a really good matchup, right? One of our arguably top games this season, with Green Bay Philly going to Brazil on Friday night of week 1 on Peacock. And that was a big piece of our schedule to get started and figuring out what we were going to do with that game and how we were going to, start the season off there. So we are really excited about that. It's something that, is new and different. We also have obviously our London games and our Germany game, but I do think that this is something that you'll continue to see expansion internationally. And it's, it definitely adds more constraints from a schedule perspective, given the fact that, where the team is before they go internationally and after, and how all these pieces work together. But at the same time, it's really exciting for, our fans, and to grow the NFL's international reach and exposure. So, it's something that I think that we'll continue to see more of, but it is really exciting to go to Brazil this year, I would say.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. That'll be a really fun one.
Yeah, we alluded to it. Let's get straight into it. What actually goes into the making of the NFL schedule? I feel like it is so everyone's like curious and wondering, and no one actually knows. So, like, what are some of like tangible steps that you can explain of how you start to build a schedule and what that process looks like?
Yeah. So first step is we as a team collectively decide what matchups we think are some of the most compelling, and which ones will be on that, prime time slate for the most part. And then also we work with the networks to see, okay, which matchups are you finding to be the ones that you'd want to be see on your packages? And so that's one first step that we initially take. Charlotte is also very much so involved with a lot of the scheduling software that we use. And so we kind of build these seed schedules around some of these primetime games, and then let a lot of other things float around, which is mainly our Sunday afternoons. And so we start to see schedules, as early as like March,
February. Yeah. Like
April,
we're even,
February. Yeah. And so we keep building them. And as draft happens and other player movements happens, we begin to shift and, the picture starts to come together a little bit more until finally we're given the okay to publish and release it.
So, are you guys starting right after Super Bowl? Is this like a right away hit the ground?
Yeah, Maggie, we honestly meet with the networks prior to Super Bowl and try and get their quote, their wish lists, if you will, and take all of it into consideration. As you can imagine, the majority of the wish lists are very similar to each other.
Yeah.
They generally give us their top 50 games, and the top 50 games are pretty similar across the board in terms of what networks are kind of hoping to see and would like on their package. So we close and lock the door the day after Super Bowl. So we know all of the regular season matchups, I should say. I should back up a minute. After the regular season ends. So once we have that, we at least know who plays who based off of rotation and standings-based games. And then from there, the last piece of the puzzle is who wins the Super Bowl. They're going to host kickoff. So this year it was Kansas City. Kansas City's hosting kickoff again. So we then have to go through the process of deciding, okay, well then who are Kansas City's opponents that we think are the right, way to start the season, if you will. So we went through the process a little bit this year. You had some decent teams, right? Like you could have gone Cincinnati, you could have gone Houston, you could have gone division game. Like there are a lot of different ways that you could have spun the kickoff story. But a lot of those have implications in other places in the schedule. You'll notice that we're using Houston down in that what we're calling the Christmas round robin, the Saturday to Wednesday little round robin we have going for Christmas. And we couldn't use Houston KC both in kickoff and as part of that. So, every single move that you make in the schedule has a trickle down effect and a reaction. It's like a Rubik's Cube. So we really let it run for a little bit and got comfortable with Baltimore, obviously AFC Championship rematch and, two really exciting young quarterbacks in a fun way to start the season. We got comfortable with that pretty quickly and decided just to stick there. But that's just an example of something as like kind of a starting point as part of the schedule. I could go on for hours about all of this, but just to give you an example, like that's something that we start with once the process gets going. But the actual process is basically we come in the morning, see what we got overnight in terms of actual schedules that ran and finished, take a look through everything, write rules, the good, the bad, the ugly, see what we like, didn't like, want to see maybe once in a while, never want to see again ever. And, oh yeah, we like it there. Let's lock that in, essentially. Run it again, look overnight and see what happened. Did locking that game in cause this trickle down effect that is giving us a different area of the search tree that we don't love as much? Should we walk that back a little bit? And so it's essentially Groundhog Day, and you're just iterating over and over and over and over again until we're finally told, hey, it's time to put this thing out. So that's basically the process. I think that Mike always says, what's the definition of an insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over and over again. That's a little bit like our process.
And when you say you're running these schedules, do you mean like on all the computers? Like this is such a silly question. Where do these computers live? Are they, I know they're not at 345 Park. Are they in the basement? Like where?
Maggie, they're all over. We use AWS cloud computing. So we use their spot instances, which is great because, we're running them overnight. There's a lot of spots available. We don't lose that many computers. We really work closely with the AWS team. And we are at our peak running on, 3,000+ computers, and we have lots of different clusters, if you will, that we'll start on. So not to get too nerdy and technical here, but we'll kind of start in different areas. So we'll say, okay, cluster number 1, you've got 300 to 400 computers in your cluster. I want you to start with Baltimore, Kansas City in week 1. Go. Cluster number 2, you've got 200 to 300 computers in your cluster. Let's try you with Chargers, Kansas City. Let's see what that looks like for kickoff. Go. And you can do all of these different things with, 10 different clusters and have different starting points. So a lot of time earlier on in the process, we will try to look in different areas and almost urge the schedules in different areas of the search tree. So it doesn't all come back with Baltimore, all come back with Chargers. It's giving us different looks of different things. And then we can make smart decisions when we're looking at all of these different schedules on things that we like. If there's anything consistent, even across the board between the different paths, what are we seeing? What are patterns that are emerging? Do we like those patterns? Do we never want to see them again? Like those sorts of things kind of, but to answer your question, all of the computers could be anywhere in the world. It's all part of AWS's cloud computing. And, I think that there was a story about, the final schedule coming from Reykjavik at some point. I have no idea where the computer was, where the final schedule came this year.
That's so funny.
Maybe that's where the next game should go. The next
That's it.
Oh, I
Yeah.
like that. You just drop
The winning
it.
Yeah, you should go talk to the Events International group and suggest Reykjavik. That's perfect.
Yep. Lucy, did you have something? I know you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, I think just along the lines of what Charlotte's been saying, like one thing that we do is at the beginning, see which games we think would be good in certain slots, but then also too, we allow for as much flexibility as possible. I think, like Charlotte said, if we just go down one path, sometimes that constrains us so much that we then end up finding schedules that, have a lot of team pain or, this wouldn't be good for whatever XYZ reason. So I think having so many different clusters allows for different paths to emerge and then gives us, the most flexibility to then pick and choose between all different options that were presented.
I guess kind of related. I know you guys, at least I've seen these commercials when we're watching our games, the AWS commercials where it shows the Val Pinchbeck old tag board of the scheduling room. Charlotte, I know you've been here for a bit. Has the scheduling process changed since you started to now, or has it been pretty consistent? Was that a pre you starting in the NFL?
It's changed significantly. Honestly, the group used to be, when I first started on the team, it was Howard Katz running the group, Mike North just wrestling with the software, and Blake Jones and myself. And Blake and I came on the same year together. There had been different iterations. Jonathan Payne had just left, and Ani Bose had just had left for a little while as well, and then eventually came back. But there were 2 open spots, and we got those 2 open spots. So stroke of luck would have it that I was able to actually get in at that point and work with, the masters themselves, Howard and Mike, as they went through this process. But it was a really small team back then. And clearly we've expanded our team pretty significantly, and everyone has their own role and skill set that they bring to the table. But the interesting piece, I would say, is, it wasn't too long ago that we were running on, like 10 computers under the desk in the schedule room, and we expanded eventually to 40 or 60. And it was just, we thought we were drunk with power back then, that we got 2 schedules overnight. And
oh my gosh.
And now we're looking at hundreds of schedules overnight on a good night. So it's a totally different process. We have so much more computing power. We've gotten a lot smarter. We're adding in more analytics than ever. We're trying to take whatever information we can and put it into the solve to make the best possible schedule at the end of the day.
Yeah. Wow. That is, I'm thinking of the 3 computers under the scheduling room for context of people listening. The scheduling room right next to my desk where I sit, but it's a tiny room. I mean, it's like a little larger than like a walk-in closet. And to think that that's where the schedule was being made for years on end is really
it
funny to me.
happens. And it smelled really bad after.
Oh boy.
I can promise you that.
Oh boy.
I can imagine. Charlotte, you touched a little bit on your like experience and responsibility. Luce, what do you do day to day when you're working with the scheduling team? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so I assist with many different things, but one of them being we have an application called the Analyzer, which allows us to take the outputs of all those AWS cloud computers and spit it out into very readable, easy Excel sheets, which we then are able to, view every single aspect of the schedule. So all the 3 away road trips and all the games that he could play that are road after road Mondays, or how many times Amazon might see a certain team. So that's one thing I help on a lot before schedule season starts and during. And then this year, I was in charge of sending out all documents. So that was a big undertaking. In fact, that a lot of moving pieces really up until the end, and just trying to make sure that every partner, whether that be all of our ticket partners and our clubs, and all of our network partners, they received all of those documents. So that was an undertaking for sure this year.
It's terrifying being the keeper of the documents. Let me tell you firsthand. It's
and
not super fun.
All the data, like throughout the season, like leading up into it, I'll, compile all my different sheets of, how many times has this team played on Christmas and how many times has this team played on Thanksgiving and what were the ratings for all these things. So as Mike Moore says, the keeper of the documents. So if there was a reference question, I'd usually be one of the people that they'd turn to see, okay, like, can you look up how many times this thing has happened, or, how many times this team has gone international. So all the facts, I'd like to say.
I've seen your SharePoint. You were maybe the most organized person I've ever met in my entire life.
There's a reason she's on the team. Yeah.
It's
definitely got a little disorganized this past couple of weeks. So that's going to be a fun project, sorting through everything. And then now going back and kind of doing a retrospective of, okay, these are all the things that happened during the schedule process. What can we improve for next season and what worked well? So that'll happen in the next few weeks.
Lucy, I want to go back to you along those lines, kind of everything you were talking about within those documents. One, I know you're a big Swiftie, and obviously Taylor Swift was a huge proponent of our league last season. Going into this season, two questions for you. One, how are you guys kind of factoring in, if at all, Taylor Swift's tour, her Eras tour? And then two, along with that, what are some of the important factors that the average fan might not know that goes into the schedule creation?
Yeah. So in terms of scheduling around Taylor, teams will fill out forms at the beginning of our process, just with any blocks that their stadium isn't available for, whether that be a concert or a convention or whatever else might be happening. And so we'll work our schedule software around that so that we're not placing games when a stadium's unavailable. There were a few coincidences. We didn't realize that Taylor would be up in Toronto the same time that Travis Kelce will be playing with the Chiefs, playing the Bills. It's week 11. Kansas City at Buffalo, 4:25 on CBS. Taylor will be up in Toronto the third weekend of November, also the fourth weekend. So she's not playing on Sunday. So
we need to stop right here. Lucy, you're totally fueling the conspiracy theorist.
You've got it all listed.
I know.
Got all these facts were way too prevalent in the top of here, but
no, I didn't know that one until Ani had told us all. So that came out after the fact.
This is what happens when you have a Swiftie on the broadcast team.
That's right.
I'm just happy
to just roll.
Yeah, we didn't plan anything around her. Certainly not. Other than any blocks that teams might have. But I'm always happy to see her at the games. So that makes me happy. Whenever we have a Chiefs game that she's able to attend.
And then are you guys factoring in anything? I know the draft just happened recently, but Caleb Williams going to the Bears and that team becoming really good all of a sudden over the offseason. Does that come into play? Anything else as far as how much travel time in between cities or in between, a Thursday night football game and a Monday night football game? What are some of those kind of niche things that go into creating the schedule?
Yeah. So to start with the Bears, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest benefits from moving the schedule release date from pre-draft to generally sometime in mid-May. The ability to actually take in that information and make shifts in our schedule. I mean, you'll see that we're using the Bears over the course of the schedule. They're definitely in national windows and prime time. But you'll also notice that if you look at some of these Sunday afternoon windows, and this is one of the areas at the end that actually becomes one of our main areas of focus when we lock in a lot of the things that we like in national windows and prime, is the coverage of the country for Sunday afternoon and what we think will be the quote unquote high coverage game and where we think all of the games on either CBS or Fox will go and which markets they'll go into to cover the country and make sure that there's something relevant and interesting for every fan in every area. Sunday afternoons are a little bit different. It's not just generally one game that's going everywhere. It's breaking up the country into pieces and making sure that the right games are going into the right markets. So as we sit here towards the end, the Bears are interesting and a team that, we can definitely rely on a little bit more. That whole, the both North, AFC and NFC North are really interesting this year, but just focusing a little bit on the NFC North for right now, you'll see that Chicago might be used as more of a high coverage game that we're counting on later in the season to anchor, as we call it, a 1 o'clock window. So not only are we using them in prime time and in national windows, but also to help us out with our 1 o'clock build as well. So that's a piece that I think that post draft we can, whether you're seeing your team that had a good draft more in prime and national windows or just maybe more exposure at 1 o'clock, it's something that we definitely take into account as we build those 1 o'clock windows towards the end.
I was just gonna say, I just remember watching Aaron Rodgers step out onto the field. It was like one of my first games I was working with you guys. And then everyone's reactions as he got injured and how that kind of impacted. I know they were in a lot of primetime games last year. They're in 6 this year. Are you guys kind of banking on the fact that fans are going to come back to watch him out of just like pure intrigue? Or what influenced that decision?
I think absolutely. I mean, he is very intriguing person. You see him all across the media, and he's also a phenomenal football player. So coming back after injury, I think the intrigue is still there, and that's why he's still in primetime. I think it'll be interesting for Jets fans and football fans in general just to see how that Jets team plays this season, which I think leads to their prominence along the primetime slots.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, guys, what's changed, right? Like from us, for where we sat in the schedule room, what's really changed with the Jets, right? Like they may have gotten even a tad better. Aaron Rodgers is hopefully healthy again. And everyone was really excited. He was the story of the offseason last year, right? Everyone was so excited to see Aaron Rodgers in, a different color green, just making this all, having his debut and seeing what he could do on the Jets. And I think there was a lot of excitement behind it. There's not that much that's really changed, right? And so hopefully as long as he's healthy and everything else, he's still Aaron Rodgers. So I think from where we sit, they have good opponents. That division could be also pretty interesting. And so we're definitely using them. And again, towards the end there's a lot of those games, even in December that we're looking at as potential anchors for those 1 o'clock windows. I know that that's overlooked sometimes and people just look at the prime times, but from where we sit as a scheduled team, those are definitely pieces that we're looking at as well. So we're definitely counting on the Jets, as you can see in the finished schedule here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It seems like year to year, there's certain consistency, especially kind of looking at like the Dallas Cowboys and how many primetime games they get. It's usually a large number. Is that something that you guys are talking to your media partners with about kind of what games they want to see and kind of some of the bigger teams and bigger markets that go into maybe helping our viewership numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say you're going to see a lot of Dallas, a lot of Kansas City. There's a reason that they're in a lot of national windows, right? Generally speaking, our job is to make sure that we're putting what the fans want to see in those national windows and putting them in the biggest spots so that the most eyeballs can get to them, right? That's our whole goal, and our job is to make sure that we are servicing the fan in the right way. And so it's making sure that we are, building towards exciting matchups, whether, early, mid, late in the season, making sure that we're putting those games in the biggest windows. Our 425 window is actually our most viewed window. So you'll see a game like a KC San Fran, for instance, on Fox, somewhat early mid-season, that's, really exciting. And there was a lot of questions when the schedule came out with, did you do that for Brady? And are you excited to have Brady on the call? Of course, we're excited to have Brady on the call. That should be really fun to see Tom Brady with, Super Bowl rematch and potentially #1 game of the year. There are a couple of them you could point to, right? You have Dallas, San Fran. There are a few really great games this year that we have to spread across partners and whatnot. But overall, yeah, you'll definitely see, consistently a lot of Dallas and Kansas City, and other brands that really have kind of emerged as top tier brand, whether you're just, a really fun, exciting team that year, or if it's just year after year, you become kind of a national brand like we're seeing with Dallas and Kansas City.
It's fun to see too, like we've talked about a little bit, some of these teams that may not have been as good in the past few years have now become good. I'm talking about like the Houstons, the Buffaloes, maybe like teams that maybe the past, 10 years weren't super strong, but have become much stronger. So I think seeing those teams on a bigger national stage is also fun to watch.
Do you guys have any personal favorite matchups that you're excited to see this season, or any that you pushed especially hard for?
That's a good question. Lise, do you have anything that you felt strongly about?
I think I felt strongly about that Green Bay at Philly matchup in Brazil. That was one our team talked a lot about. I think being on a platform like Peacock, it's always good to come up with a strong matchup like that. So I think that's one that I'm really excited to see. I'm from Cleveland originally, so I think week one, watching that Dallas at Cleveland game is also fun. Speaking of another team that hasn't been super great in the past few years, that's now gotten much better. I think that will be a great matchup to see. So
I like Dallas Philly in week 17. I think that, yeah, there's a chance that, one of them's clenched and it's not as exciting, but there's still that opportunity for that to be such a big way to get down the stretch and enter into, the second to last week of the season. I'm really excited about that one. I thought that was a great spot for that game, assuming everything goes as planned.
same with
That
like
feels like such a
those
classic.
divisional matchups. Like I also lived in Buffalo for a little bit, so seeing like week 2 Amazon Prime Video open up with Buffalo and Miami, I think AFC East matchups are always, fun to watch. I think those teams especially are good competitors and two young quarterbacks that I think, the past few seasons have been really exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot of good storylines coming out of the draft, just coming off this off season. We have one more hard-hitting question before we let you go. So, if the NFL is scripted, would that make you guys like the executive directors, producers?
I prefer Puppet Master, Maggie, if you will.
Just pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Lucy, what do you think? What is our title here?
If we were script writers, things might turn out differently than sometimes than how we would expect them in May. So I think if we had the crystal ball, sometimes things go according to plan per se, but sometimes things just take an entirely different turn. So I think that's the fun part of not only doing something that you really love doing, is when you actually watch it on TV, you're like, how could this happen? So I think that always is what makes me excited when we start a new season, is just how things unfold. So
And best laid plans, right? Like
Yeah.
this is we put this thing together. It's a labor of love, right? This team works really hard, all hours, day and night, and it's again the Groundhog Day reference. It's doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we keep coming back year after year and trying to get better and smarter. And how can we make the schedule? How can we use the analytics and data to actually help us create a better solution for next year? So we go back to the drawing board, to be honest with you, starting now, and look at things that we could improve for next year. How can we do things differently? And we'll work through the summer trying to figure out how to, quote unquote, build a better mousetrap and get smarter and better for next year. But, best laid plans, right? All joking aside, I think that our crystal ball is not always perfect. That's why we have flex scheduling. And so we can make shifts during the season if we need to. Hopefully we don't, and we don't flex all that often, but if something totally falls apart, we at least have the levers to pull to be able to try to serve our fans and put the right games in the right windows.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think all of America probably thanks you guys for your work. Let's be so honest.
Very much so.
You guys are doing important work.
It's fun to work on something like this that, doesn't divide people for the most part. It brings people together, even if, you're a fan of a different team. It's so many people watch it. So it touches a lot of homes across this country and now, overseas. So it's fun to be a part of.
Yeah.
They did. You guys do such amazing work. And I think it's important / necessary to highlight the fact that you guys are such a small team and get so much work done. It is so impressive. I had the opportunity to sit around the broadcast team for a little bit and to just see the work that goes into everything that the season is, building the schedule throughout the season. It's so impressive. So kudos to you guys. And also, like, if I were on the team, I wouldn't resist from scheduling 10 primetime games for the Saints. So you guys really do great work. Like I would have Drew Brees on all the time. It'd be a mess. But with that, thank you guys so much for joining today. Maggie, I'll let you have the last piece.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. This has been really fun and I think really insightful for myself and for the listeners. And thanks for being our first guest. This feels big.
Thank you guys for having us. This is
Yeah, thanks
great.
very
Fun
much.
to talk to you guys.